Good morning, everyone. This is Erica Oriens from the Michigan Center for Student Success. Thank you for joining us this morning for our annual virtual meeting. For those of you who have attended one of our meetings in the past, you know that we like to meet quarterly in person, but in the winter, that's a challenge in Michigan, and certainly would have been over the last couple days as well. So we're glad to be able to join you virtually. I'm wondering if someone could unmute themselves.
I mean, that's unmuting us.
If you can hear me.
I can hear you. This is Laura Cosby.
Thanks, Laura.
Jennifer Fager.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I can hear you.
So we'll go ahead and get started. We have a packed agenda today, and I know some of you have a whole group of folks on your campus who are joining the webinar. We have I think over 130 people registered, but I know some of that includes multiple people at your institution, so we have a great turnout today. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started with our program. We are recording. And so this will all be available after the event, and I'll show you where that is a little bit later in the presentation. But first, we wanted to focus a little bit on why first I wanted to go over the agenda. So for our meeting this year, we are going to be featuring 5 colleges in Michigan who are implementing various strategies to re-engage adults, or to provide more opportunities for adults to enroll. Our setup is we're featuring 5 colleges about every half hour. Each of those presentations will begin at either the top of the hour or at 9:30 or 10:30. And then those folks will present for about 15 minutes. We'll have about 5 minutes for questions, and then we'll have a 10-minute break. So you can go, check your email, or take a bio break, or send a Valentine. So that will be the structure that we have today. So just keep that in mind as you think about planning your morning. But I wanted to start by talking about why did we want to focus on adult re-engagement, and why was this important to us? And back in the fall, we invited the Community College Research Center to present at one of our events, and they presented some data on enrollment. And I wanted to share that with you today because I thought most people that were there found this to be very compelling, and I thought it was helpful to share that with you today. So we're looking at data of Michigan's fall enrollment by sector between 2001 and 2017. And this will probably look somewhat familiar to you, but we see here in the blue line that state-supported community colleges had enrolled just about the same number of students as the public universities. And then we had a peak in the period in about 2009 to 2011, and then our enrollment has declined since that peak in 2011. So then what CCRC did is they broke that down by age. Age data is reported to IPEDS, and so although not a perfect source of data, a fairly good source of data for this information. And if we keep our eye on the blue line here, we see that the decline in enrollment between 2011 and 2017 for community colleges among 18 to 24-year-old undergraduates certainly declined. We lost about 26,000 students. We went from about 134,000 students in 2011 in this age group down to 108,000. So a decline, but not as significant of a decline as we saw overall. Then we look at students who are 17 and younger, and we actually see the opposite trend among community colleges. So in 2011, there were approximately 13,000 students enrolled under the age of 13,000 students enrolled under the age of 17. And then in 2017, that has increased to 22,000 students. So we've increased by about 9,000 students just in that 6-year time period. So I'm leaving the big reveal till the end here, but if we take a look at adults that are 25 and older, that's where we see the largest decline in our enrollment. So between 2011 and 2017, we went from serving 103,000 students ages 25 and older, and that dropped to 57,000 students in 2017. And so by this decline, of course, represented somewhere around 75% of the decline in our enrollment. Michigan statewide among community colleges was due to adults not enrolling, or students ages 25 and older. And so this, combined with a lot of other things, was really interesting to us and made us really start thinking about the work that you're doing at community colleges to increase, to make available all the great things that you're doing around changing the way that your delivery model and some of the ways that you deliver courses and serve students that may benefit adults. And so we wanted to share that data with you in terms of why we saw this as an important issue, and then why we're planning on featuring the 5 colleges that we are featuring today. I also wanted to spend a little bit of time this morning providing an update on the Center for Student Success. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with our center, the Michigan Center for Student Success is a center of excellence within the Michigan Community College Association. We were created with a generous grant from the Kresge Foundation in 2011. And so now we are in our 9th year in Michigan. And our vision is really to support community colleges and their student success efforts, particularly around the idea of linking policy, practice, and research. We are based in Lansing, so we work closely with MCCA in their legislative and public advocacy work as well. But the majority of our work really focuses on engaging with the colleges and providing colleges with the support that they need to improve student outcomes. I want to just provide a brief update on some of the projects that we've been working on over the last year. First, we were part of a group that received a grant from the state of Michigan to replace the Michigan Transfer Network. Those of you who have worked in Michigan for a while remember the old MTN at michigantransfernetwork.org. And it really was in need of an update, a facelift, and a better technology infrastructure to work from. So we worked with the Association of State Universities, the Michigan Association of Independent Colleges, and Macro to replace the MTN. The new web address is located at mytransfer.org. And if you haven't explored this resource, I would strongly encourage you to do so. In the previous version of the MTN, students could primarily just focus on transferring their courses. It included a very good course equivalency database, but with the new launch of the MTN, which was actually launched closer to 9 months ago now, there's a lot more information for colleges and universities to use out there. The other feature that we've added is a very robust back-end system. So there's significant reporting features available to colleges and opportunities to download data so that you can do some analysis on your own as well. So we would encourage you to look at those resources that are available to you. Over the next 2 months or so, we will be releasing some additional enhancements to the MTN that will be shared with the users of the site or the secure users of the site, but also we'll be sharing that with our network of community colleges as well. So look forward to some enhancements to the website over the next couple of months. With those same resources that we received from the state of Michigan now about 2.5 years ago, we also have been working with multiple community colleges and universities across the state of Michigan to launch what we call the My Transfer Pathways. And essentially, these are articulation agreements, but they're articulation agreements between about almost 60 colleges and universities across the state. In December of 2019, we launched these My Transfer Pathways in 4 program areas, including biology, business, criminal justice, and psychology. And in May of 2020, we'll launch additional pathways in 8 programs, including art, communication, computer science, English, exercise science, mechanical engineering, public health, and social work. These 12 programs represent some of the most popular bachelor's degrees that students receive in Michigan. So we're looking forward to launching those and helping colleges to implement those on your campuses. There is a webinar, another webinar that's scheduled for next Thursday, February 20th, from 9 to 10:30 a.m. that will talk with colleges and universities about implementing the transfer pathways. So if you're a community college that is participating in all 4 of the first 4 pathways, biology, business, criminal justice, and psychology, while those are 4 agreements, they involve multiple universities in each one of those agreements. And you essentially have about 67 new transfer agreements just in those 4 programs. Because in psychology, for example, we have 20 participating universities. So in the past, your institution, your community college may have 20 different agreements with universities in psychology. So we understand the complexity of this and how challenging it is to think about how you'll implement this on your campus and clearly communicate this information to students. So we wanted to make sure that we're providing support for you to implement these pathways on your campus. The webinar is the first way that we'll be doing that, and we'll be providing additional support after this webinar as well. The other program that we have actually just launched this last month, actually, we received a grant from the ECMC Foundation to launch a project that we call My Best, Michigan Building Economic Stability Today. And the focus of this project is really drilling down into connecting students with those non-academic supports that they need to persist in college and to complete. So we know from national research and student focus groups and surveys of students that some of the greatest barriers to completion are life issues. And many of those, the way that we kind of describe those are housing security, food security, transportation, childcare, and consistent employment as well. And so this project will really focus on supporting colleges in their efforts to connect students with public benefits and community resources that can help them toward completion. We will be hosting the kickoff convening for this project on March 26th in Jackson. And we also welcomed our new coordinator of this project. Her name is Precious Miller, and she joins us from her previous position at Western Michigan University. But Precious is also has a background as a social worker. And so she has already been, in just her first couple weeks on the job, has been invaluable in helping us connect with those community resources and public benefits that would be so beneficial to our students. So you'll continue to watch for updates on that project as well. Finally, I want to talk about our guided pathways work. We were fortunate to receive an extension of this grant from the Kresge Foundation. So we will continue more of this work all the way through the end of 2020. You can find more information about this project at myguidedpathways.org. For those of you who've worked with us before, you know we really like these websites that say "my" at the beginning. One of the features that I really want to emphasize with Guided Pathways is we have also launched a new mentoring program associated with our Guided Pathways work. And we have some excellent folks across the state who have been engaged in Guided Pathways work for a number of years and have volunteered to help us provide a mentoring program to all of our colleges. And what we really mean by that is these folks are, if you can identify, if your institution can identify a, kind of a sticky problem that you're having in some of your Guided Pathways implementation, we can help pair you with a mentor who can kind of be an outside voice to help you work through that. So I would, if you're interested in that, I think it can be a great opportunity to kind of hear that outside voice that I think is very helpful when you're working through an issue. If you're interested in having a mentor, I would encourage you to go out to the myguidedpathways.org website and then click on Find a Mentor or the MCSS Mentoring Network to find out more about how you can do that. We at the Center for Student Success, we know that this happens a lot informally, this cross-sharing between institutions. And I think you'll obviously hear more about that from 5 of our community colleges today. But this is really an opportunity to provide those mentors with some additional support to be able to help you with some of your Guided Pathways challenges. I also want to mention our upcoming events. Last summer, MCCA launched a new website. If you go to mcca.org, you can see a list of all of our upcoming events by clicking on the Events tab up in the top of the website. You can also filter by Michigan Center for Student Success to view all of our upcoming events. I know this can be really helpful for you when you're trying to get dates on your calendar so that you want to make sure that you hold those dates for the various meetings that we're having across the state. So please go out there to our events and make sure that you get those dates on your calendar. This is also where we'll include registration for those events as well, so that that will just be one place where you can find all that information. If you'll, on the previous slide, there's also a button here that says View Past Events. And if you view past events after today, you'll be able to see this 2020 MCSS virtual meeting on here. After today, we will have this meeting recorded, and we'll have the recording available on the MCCA website. And then all of the presentations that you'll see today will also be available on this page, on our events page. So after today, please look for that information out here on the MCCA website. We're hoping that when we do our recording, we'll be able to split each of these sections into their little 20-minute segments. So if there's just one area of the program you're interested in reviewing again, you'll be able to have access to that as well. This is just some data sources that I used so that you have some reference if you wanted to go back and find any of this information. And so, as I mentioned earlier at the top of the hour, our schedule is really to do 20 minutes of presentations and then have a break for about 10 minutes. You can get your coffee and get settled back in or check your email. So it's time for our break. But before we do that, I also wanted to mention, it sounds like everybody is muted. I'm not seeing a lot of background noise, but just so you know, if you do want to ask a question, you will have to unmute yourself, which you can do in your system tray. There is a mute and an unmute button in your system tray, which should appear at the top or the bottom of your screen. You'll also see a chat in there as well. And you can use that chat to ask questions if you don't want to mute yourself. And I'll
Welcome everyone. Good morning. It's a real privilege to be invited to this really important conversation. We're here to talk about our 7-week classes at Jackson College. I'm Kate Thiroff, VP for Instruction. I got a couple team members who are joining me, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hey, good morning. Jeremy Frew, Vice President of Student Services.
Good morning. I'm Heather Rakowski. I'm the Assistant Professor for Vascular Ultrasound and Allied Health Chair.
So before we talk about how we brought 7-week classes to Jackson College, we wanted to make sure to define what that meant, what they are and what they're not. So what 7-week classes are not is taking our traditional 15-week class and just cutting it in half. Instead, our 7-week classes are identical to our traditional 15-week classes. Same number of contact hours, same number of credits, same high-quality instruction, same course materials. The only difference is that they're delivered in 7 weeks rather than the traditional 15. So how does that look? This slide shows in that first row what a typical student would do when taking 4 classes with us in a 15-week mode. So they'd be taking all 4 of those classes at the same time, wouldn't get grades until after grades are submitted after week 15, and that's just how it typically had gone at JC. Moving to 7-week classes allows a student to chunk their academic plan into 2 different groups. So they can take 2 classes in the first 7 and then 2 classes in the second 7. So there's a variety of benefits to this. One of the big ones is that your students are gaining credits more frequently, maybe not faster, but more frequently across their academic trajectory. We know that life happens to our students. It's not like 7-week classes is going to prevent that from happening, but just for example, if we have a student who is taking 4 15-week classes all at the same time and something dramatic happens in week 11 or week 12. Let's say they hit a pothole on their way to campus and their car is in the shop for a few weeks and there's no way they can get to campus. Well, they just lost 12 of those credits, even if they were doing exceptionally well in them. In a 7-week model, now of course potholes still exist as we know, but if it happens in week 11, as in the case here in the bottom row, those are 6 credits that student has in their back pocket, on their transcript. No one's going to take them away. So that's one reason why 7-week classes has been shown to be very successful and beneficial. There's also something about an intensity of focused on just 2 classes at a time. It helps students so they're not juggling as much. And what we're also hearing is that students and faculty sort of enjoy the more intense experience. More bonding happens, relationships are stronger, because it's a more intense experience.
This is Jeremy. I want to add something too. What's really good about this slide, this is something we use with our key stakeholders in the community as well as in the campus. The visual and be able to see the 7 weeks, how it's broke down, made it easier for not only the folks implementing, but everybody around campus to understand what it looked like and what it meant. So this is a real good tool for that too.
So our motivation overall. Why did we move to 7-week classes? Because it is a heavy lift, as you'll hear. It's all about our students. Here at Jackson College, we have what we call our total commitment to student success, TCS squared. Everything we do, all the decisions we make, is really guided by our first belief. The success of our students is always our first priority. And when we started to see students being more successful in this model, we couldn't unknow that. We had to continue to pursue and look to scale quickly to benefit all students. Related to that, on this next slide, sorry if I can, here we go. One thing that we use for any sort of institutional change is design thinking, and this is one example of it. Many of you are probably familiar with design thinking, but it's all about thinking about your students, really focusing on them and what they need, what they want, how to improve what we offer to make their experience in college better. So that's the shift phase. Then you start conceptualizing what a change, what a new plan might look like. And then you move into prototype and test. And we did pilot 7 weeks, as Jeremy will share in just a little bit, and gather data, get a quantitative and qualitative to see how things are going. And then the last phase is to scale. And this model you'll see it's called commercialize. If a student success strategy is working for a group of students, it's really important to try to scale as quickly as you can so that all students can benefit.
So the planning for 7 weeks, or the understanding and discovery mode. Like anything we go into, we know it's really important being an educational institution and being a business that we do some thorough research and best practice and so forth. When we did the research, what we found right away, which just blew us away, is the higher success rates. Students in 7 weeks are having much more success rates. A big one, and you'll see it in our data, a lot less withdrawals, which you all know equal not completers, which hurts financial aid, hurts all kinds of different things. The retention grades are huge. I mean, again, in the presentation you saw earlier, there's enrollment issues. The best way to help those enrollment issues is retention. And this is a strategy. So this is an enrollment strategy as well. And also we were getting completers at a higher rate. Some of the places we went down and visited was Odessa College and Triad Technical College, leaders in this and schools who have seen huge gains in this and gave us great examples. Something I think is important to know though, each school, when they do their research and look at what they have, end up coming up with their own version of this. The principles are the same. Some are 7 weeks, some are 8 weeks, some have a break. So it's really important as you hear this today, what we're doing may not be perfect for your campus, but the principles and stuff make sense, and then you got to find what works.
A note on when we visited other colleges, we made sure that we brought a pretty cross-functional team. So faculty went, student services went, we had navigators, college student advisors went, to be able to see and understand how different, but also how beneficial 7 weeks could be. So that's what we did when we visited other colleges. We made sure we brought a pretty big team to go to listen about it and learn about it.
So implementation, this is where some of the biggest heavy lifting is, because it's really institutional change. It's a culture change on your campus. It's not an academic initiative, it's not a student service initiative, it's not a president initiative, it's an institutional change, an institutional initiative. And that's why what Kate was talking to you about the cross-function teams going on these visits was important, because those folks who went there then came back and started working on this institutional change. One of the big things that made this possible at Jackson College, and I think has been a benefit for our institution for a number of initiatives, is our scheduling office is centralized. And what this allowed is folks who do scheduling, which actually lies under our registrar because of the pathways work and the curriculum work. The schedule of 7 weeks was built with the idea of pathways and built out of graduation and student needs. Big part that made this possible and a lot easier, very important. As Kate said, we did a pilot in 2017 with networking courses. This was an ideal pilot because boot camps are very popular, as you all know, and this was sort of our own version of a boot camp. Fall 2018, 25% of our class sections were 7 week, and this winter 2019, 50% of our class sections were in 7 week format. And fully scaled 2019, 75%. Just for clarification, the reason 75% is fully scaled, there is some unique courses that don't fit this format, and we have a way for courses to be exempt from it, a process, but also we have a lot of courses that are at the correction education program. They're all 15 weeks. The use of the facilities and hours available do not allow it. So 75% was fully implemented, and that's important to note. Also, we had a number of increased hybrid offerings.
Hi, this is Heather. So I want to talk a little bit about the slide that Kate had mentioned in the design thinking. A big part of this type of a movement is considering, while you're thinking of design thinking methodology, is to include the user. And that user is, again, we talked about cross-functional groups. That includes all of our faculty, our students, every part of the institution. And then, of course, we want to think about what does that look like with our users, specifically the faculty and the student. It's a considerable amount of work to make the transition. So during this time, we created this implementation team. And through there, several of us decided that we wanted to take a look at what we were doing and kind of clear out our thoughts on what we knew as pedagogy and what our students needed. So we invited the team, and it ended up being so large, we filled our room, in standing room, actually. We were in standing room. And in that time, we included our students. We never left that piece out, because in the end, when we think of designing learning experiences, the students are really at the core of what we do. So with their feedback and identifying those champions in our group, we were able to create this brilliant fact sheet, and then continued on as we worked through the work. We still meet regularly. We still maintain logs of things that work, that don't. We always come back to the student feedback to see what courses are, needing to be looked at, and all the things that we need to do to change and help their success. So what does that look like from a faculty perspective? It's not easy to wipe out what you know as a typical traditional learning experience or teaching experience. So we had to really talk about not using the word compress. When you talk about compression of work, that it can be considered watering down. It could be considering how do we ensure that students will transfer knowledge past, the work that they've gathered and the knowledge in their coursework. So the large part of that design was wiping it all away and starting backwards. I identified the learning outcomes that were really important to our stakeholders. I decided what evidence, I needed to have to ensure that they learned in that particular content. And then that's when I decided what activities that was going to be able to show that. A big part of this type of work is really considering avoiding teaching to chapters. I call it curriculum bloat or content bloat, where we just keep dumping things in, and now we've got 15 weeks and probably 18 chapters and can't get it all in. So I really focused on exactly what I needed my students to learn and how they were going to show me that they learned it. So what does that look like in course success? So we have an average of 78% over the past 10 years. And when you look at these numbers here, you can see a considerable drop in our withdrawal rates from the first 7 weeks to the 15-week traditional classrooms. We took some of our harder courses and we put them into 7 weeks. A lot of us were very nervous, but what we found was a phenomenal increase in their success rates and their ability to retain and stay focused and engaged with us. We also remained more engaged with them. It held us all a little bit more time to a time frame and to what was really important in the class, and took out all that excess bloat. And you can see in these numbers, the withdrawal rates, the success rates have went up quite considerably in our opinions, and with the data to show it, we were really excited about that. Student feedback was just flowing in as far as, their excitement that they actually learned something and took something away from the class.
Also, I think it's important to add that for context, this is fall 2019. We're still learning. We're still learning how to do 7 weeks. And so we're improving as we're learning. This is only going to get better. So I just think that's important. We're very excited about this data right out of the gun.
And something I've acknowledged to faculty in our faculty learning days, I was pretty certain fall 2019 was not going to look so great. Because when you scale and you scale quickly, you're going to hit some bumps. And there was sort of, I thought for certain that it would not be as strong a data, but as Jeremy noted, we're really quite pleased with this. A note about why we quickly scaled too, especially during that somewhat clunky time when we were, as Jeremy showed on the screen earlier, from a couple semesters, when you had 15-week classes and 7-week classes, that can be really tough on a student. It's not the biggest bang for the buck if they're taking a couple 15 weeks and a couple 7 weeks. It's ideal when they can take all 7-week classes. So we realized that and scaled pretty quick, as you can see. But again, really thrilled with the fall 2019 data so far.
So we talked about it earlier about being an institutional initiative, and one of the things that's changing the culture, what we like to call changing the narrative. When we started down this road, it was faculty were very concerned. It's impossible. It's not going to be good for students. Students were very concerned. They were coming to us saying there's no way I can do this. We have a number of key stakeholders, high school partners, our dual enrollment students. I had superintendents calling us, principals calling us, counselors calling us. There was so much fear around it in our staff. But let me tell you, as the data's been coming out, we've been sharing it and the narrative is changing. And that is a huge part of this implementation. You need to get the message out. You need to have the photo that Kate showed earlier, what it looks like. And you need to be talking and have a consistent message and consistent narrative to these different key stakeholders. Because if the narrative doesn't change, there's going to be naysayers through the whole way. And I will just share the superintendents who I get to work with quite a bit. They were scared to death, and I will be honest, I was scared to death. Dual enrollment students doing 7 weeks. They were in the 85 to 86% success rate. So once we started sharing that data, now the high school partners are saying we only want our students in 7 weeks. The narrative has changed, and I think that is a really important part. You need to control the narrative and make sure it's consistent and get out there, or you'll constantly be questioning and having people second guessing.
So some great key takeaways here. This is one of my favorites. Moving to 7 weeks has given me the opportunity across my curriculum to chunk the knowledge into smaller chunks and pull out important content. And if we know how people learn, we learn in smaller nuggets over a little bit of a period of time and be able to practice that. So this has been very successful experience for my students and my curriculum.
One of the things in Center for Student Success, our tutors and so forth, we had to increase hours. We had to increase our testing lab hours to meet the 7-week demand. Also, we've increased our online tutoring options, and it's benefited the whole campus. But these are some things you have to think about with 7 weeks.
Like any institutional change, there's going to be pushback, there's going to be bumps. Absolutely anticipate those challenges, expect pushback, and even welcome it. You need to have many perspectives in order to achieve buy-in and achieve the right design to serve students best. And that's how we end. Just stay focused on what's best for students. You bet we're, after fully scaling in fall 2019, we're still doing some tweaks, but we feel really good about where we're at because of the student feedback, because of the student grades that we've received so far, and that's what drives our work. So excited again to be doing this, excited to be sharing our story with you. And at this point, I think we turn to questions.
Great, thank you. So for those of you that are on the phone, you can add questions into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question. We have, by the way, congratulations, Jackson. You did it in about 17 minutes. So we have a few minutes for questions.
Financial aid challenge.
Financially.
Yeah, this is Jeremy. There really hasn't been much. I mean, one of the things that is really important is it stayed within the 15-week semester. So, you know, the ends are the same. I mean, disbursement dates and all that, that gets a little tricky, but no, by keeping the start end dates within the regular semester, it really allowed us flexibility. It's not been an issue, because to be frank, we had 12-week courses and 7-week courses before this, which actually made it more difficult because we had too many start ends. Hello?
This is what I show on the computer, so I'm having a.
Any other questions about 7-week classes?
I'm seeing some more come into the chat.
Okay.
We can't.
Yeah, so
sorry.
we have
Here
some questions about tutoring, and then also about the sequencing of courses, particularly in math, if there were any issues with the sequencing. Courses that are sequential.
Jeremy and Kate, I can speak to the tutoring. This is Monica, if you'd like.
Great, thanks, Monica.
Yeah. So, hello, my name is Monica, and I also work at Jackson College. I oversee the Center for Student Success, which houses all of our tutoring. And there was a question as to what tutoring service we used. And we have experimented in the past with a Pearson product called Smart Thinking, which has shown some usage.
The thing about it is I'm not hearing her voice now.
Is anyone hearing me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. So as I said, we have experimented with a Pearson product called Smart Thinking as an online service, as the question asked. We've had some usage. We haven't had a ton. We also experimented with expanding our tutoring online after hours internally. So we created through our JetNet portal, it's called Big Blue Button, which is an opportunity for students to conversate face-to-face through our online JetNet system. And so with that, the tutors, our own Jackson College tutors, make themselves available online on the weekends and in the evenings. And then that way students have the ability to connect with them at their convenience.
Thanks, Monica.
Question? Yeah.
Another question about faculty union. We are unionized here at JC. Faculty would have a range of reactions.
Yeah. This is Heather, and yes, we all did. At first, it was quite a shock because, again, we were hearing words compressed, just things that were very concerning. Of course, we dived into our own peer research, and you know, argumentatively, there is some debates and data. However, as we started moving through it, even those faculty that were very nervous, including myself, we moved into it, and some of those courses that I talked about, some of those faculty were the most against it, and found that once they did it, they were shocked at the results, especially in some of our higher end courses, physics, things like that. So yeah, there was a little bit in the beginning, and it's much less now, much less.
And also remember, seat time doesn't change. I mean, the actual time on task does not change. It's just you're only in 2 classes instead of 4 or 5 classes. That's the real big difference.
There was also a question about lead time. We did start piloting this a couple years ago, and we've been talking about it for probably a little longer than that. I would say it was really probably fall 2018 when we said, all right, we're putting the stake down. We're going to say fall 2019. Fall 2019, 1 year later, is when we're going to look to fully scale.
But I think it's about 2 or 3 years of conversation.
It was. It was. And then even at that point, there was some modifications along the way when we saw that some courses needed just a little bit more time. Our leadership team was considerate to the fact that some courses needed more time to be revamped and reconsidered into the 7-week format. And there was professional development that needed to occur as well. That was an important part of this transition. If you want to avoid the term compression, you have to rethink, and that takes some professional development and considerations with those that already have made that move.
There was a question about math too. I can speak to that. I know we're running a little short on time, but it's a good question. Our math department brought in their own professional development expert to help them with this, who was exceptional. We loved her so much, we brought her to Faculty Learning Days this fall. And so the math faculty, I give them huge kudos. They recognize the way to do this, kind of the right way, is to offer math 4 days a week in a 7-week class. So that's one thing they have done. That's sort of a high touch every day, working on math every day is a good mode, whether it's 7 weeks or 15 weeks, if we're honest. And so that's one way that they were able to do it. I will say for developmental courses, we have all a co-requisite model, which means we've pretty much eliminated standalone developmental education. Students who come in with a Dev Ed hold, they take their developmental class, but it's also blended co-rect with taking at the same time a college level class. Those blended courses are all offered in a 15-week format. Those are ones that were exempt because they're already pretty accelerated, getting developmental and college level credit all in one term in 15 weeks. Erica,
right,
do we have time for more? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think we're running out of time. I want to make sure that we have enough time to transition to the next presentation. But I will plug the Student Success Summit is in September of 2020, and we will be, I think we'll be back at the Kellogg Center, and it sounds like lots of people are interested in this, so maybe Jackson College could do a full hour-long presentation on this at the Student Success Summit. So I want to make sure we have enough time to transition, and also thank you, Jackson, for presenting and for the great work that you're doing over there. So we'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back at 9:30 and we'll hear from Lake Michigan College. Thanks a lot. All right, welcome back everyone. This is Erica Oriens again from the Michigan Center for Student Success. And for our second presentation of the morning, I'm pleased to turn it over to Jay Keeler from Lake Michigan College. Jay?
Thank you. Morning, everyone. So I am the lead faculty for applications development here at Lake Michigan College, and we are about 3 years into a full-blown effort in virtual delivery. So we have at least pioneered for our campus the use of this virtual learning environment. And the goal was to leverage video conferencing and our LMS, and we use Canvas, although you can certainly do the same thing with Blackboard and Moodle, to increase student access to our programming, both certificate and degree programs, and to expand our enrollment beyond our geographic boundaries. So our approach has been to convert as many classes as possible into basically video conferencing sessions. And we post these cross-listed sections that appear as if they are a single asynchronous online, because when students see online, they think that means asynchronous, virtual delivery, and then a traditional in-seat section. So we'll have those sections displayed in Banner, but then all of those sections are actually merged into a single section in Canvas. And then students in Canvas, our LMS, have access to all the same resources, and most importantly, to each other. So when we do have people show up in seat, we still require students to join the virtual session, even though I'm in front of them, and then we record the sessions. So once those sessions are recorded and we have captured student interaction, student-teacher interaction, annotations on the PowerPoints or whatever's going on, all of those recordings get posted up into our LMS. And then students can view those asynchronously if they're in the asynchronous version of that course. And the students who do attend live, either in seat or virtually, become the proxies for students who view those things asynchronously. And usually it's people who take the course, if they can't attend at the time we're offering the class, but a lot of times I'll have students who are in class who want to go back and review that content as well. So in addition to posting those sessions, we've also pushed all of our assignments and our assessments out into our LMS, and we use our lockdown browser integration to give that some integrity. So this is what we've developed as a model for offering our content. So we've got 3 different modalities students can use to take our classes. They can use the traditional, if you want to call it that, I suppose, what students view as asynchronous online, and they can just log in and learn and participate. And they still have access to each other through the chats and through the Zoom link that we embedded in the course. But then we also have synchronous delivery, and we'd much rather people show up in person, but there are a lot of reasons why that's not practical. So they can come in from home, or they can come to one of our satellite campuses and take advantage of the internet there, should the internet in their neck of the woods not be particularly good. So this is an example. This is a screenshot right out of Banner for this semester. So we will offer a section that appears in seat, and we have 3 campuses, and you'll notice that it is listed on all 3 campuses, and it's the exact same time on all 3 campuses because it's actually broadcast from here, from the main campus. Although I do have a tour schedule where I visit the remote campuses and broadcast from there, because I don't want those people to feel like they don't have face-to-face time as well. But you'll notice that in Banner, we put a description that tells students this course is taught in a virtual learning environment, and they have the option of attending face-to-face or remotely real-time using web conferencing software. At the same time, we have the same course listed online. It's called online. There are no specific times associated with it, but they are cross-linked in Banner. And then behind the scenes in our LMS, I've got everything merged. So you'll notice these 2 sections that I just saw in Banner all funnel into the same Canvas spot. So students have access to the same resources, same assessments, and each other. So here's a typical Canvas page for our courses delivered in this format. And the very first module in the top of the Canvas page is Welcome to Lake Michigan College and Welcome to the Virtual Classroom. So there's a description of what that's supposed to look like. There's a little utility to check your system to see if you've got the requirements met and what to do to remedy that, how to set up your audio and video so you don't have to do that by the seat of your pants during the first day of class, how to use it on your phone if you want to do that. I've had students do that. And then down here below the virtual classroom, because our assessments are pushed onto Canvas, how to use Lockdown Browser to take your tests. And Lockdown Browser, and there's other products out there too, but Lockdown Browser is pretty affordable and it's got really good LTI integration. And it prevents students from Googling test questions, kind of thing. So that's in the very top of every course that we offer in this format, so students can get acclimated. We also send out by email a flyer that explains what this virtual classroom is all about. And we send it to everyone who's registered for the course, and we let them know that it is optional if you want to attend, virtually through a webcam. And that you can watch these things online, and you don't have to show up when the class is scheduled. That doesn't mean you don't have to do what you're supposed to do every week, right? And we also promote this flexible delivery and that students can pick their mode of delivery any day of the week. So if you registered for the course and seat and you took on a job, or you were sick that particular week, or whatever circumstance might prevent you from coming physically to campus, then you can attend virtually. And if you have a life change that week that you can't attend virtually or physically, then you will watch the recorded sessions. Conversely, I have people who register for the course asynchronous online, and then they decide it's a bit more challenging or they want some FaceTime, and they say, can we come in? Well, sure you can. All right, so we just kind of have a revolving door on the 3 different delivery modes and allow that to fit people's lifestyles. So the second module they see here in Canvas is an introduction to the course, and then there is at the very top of the resources area, the link to the reserved Zoom session dedicated to this particular class. So, and then there's other course resources, of course, that vary by whatever is being offered, but this is the standard format. We have a module that explains virtual delivery, and then we have a link in the very top of the Canvas site that shows you all you got to do is click on it. So there's no adding it to your Outlook calendar. There's no looking for it in an email. It's just a standing session in Zoom. And those of you who've used Zoom before, you can go in and you can set up these recurring sessions with different session IDs or meeting IDs. And of course, that's what we have here. We've got a separate dedicated channel for every one of the courses that we offer in this format. So this is a standard workstation in my lab. I have to have a webcam on it. The bullet cams cost $30 a piece, right? And I've got a classroom full of them where students are participating with me, but I'm also capturing whatever is going to my podium and my panels on the wall. And this is a standard podium now that we use, a couple $1,000 sit-stand desk with about 1,500 bucks of computer gear. And this was a screenshot of my podium this morning. So I've got a share screen, which is on my left panel, and I've got a private screen, which is on my right panel, where I might be looking at attendance or grades or whatever. And I can choose what I want to share. And I've got this Wacom tablet here that costs a couple $100 that allows me to use Zoom to go in and annotate presentations or pull up a whiteboard and do whatever. And if you've ever used Zoom before, it's quite easy to go in there and take, annotate and take a screenshot. And it goes right into the same folder or into the cloud with the recording that you are managing. So if you've used Zoom before, and of course we're using it now, we've got a gallery of participants, right? And when I say things like Hollywood Squares, people go, what? But if you remember that show, if you're old enough to remember that show, the active speaker is the one that lights up, right? So we've got a rogues gallery and we've got an active speaker, and you can set it up to record all of the participants like I have here in a screenshot of one of my sessions, or you can set it up so it just captures the active speaker. You know, if you don't want that to include the image that's being recorded. But regardless, right, how you record that, we then take those recordings and we push them out to Canvas in the content blocks. So you can go into Canvas, create a content block, upload these MP4s, which depending upon the length of the session can be quite long, and you're not tagged for the storage associated with that. right? So Canvas doesn't charge you to push these things out there. And we've got several terabytes worth of video that are out there that, you know, they host for us for free. So when a student wants to watch a video, they'll just click on this content block and it'll take them to the player. And notice how degraded the video quality is here. So if you're just a talking head and you don't have any particular content that you need to share in detail on the screen, the Canvas player will play it back at a low resolution that ensures consistent playback on a low bandwidth connection. But if you do have a video like I do in this instance, where you've got to have some visual fidelity, you just click on this little chooser icon and you pick the resolution that fits the bill. So native resolution in this instance was 1920 by 1080. And if I just choose the higher res, then, you know, it clears up. And you can choose that dynamically. But again, for people who have a poor internet connection, they can even just download it. They can just click on it, download it, and watch it offline. So I have all of these videos that are pushed into this content block right here in Canvas, and Blackboard and Moodle have their own version of that. But I also have the ability with this product that we added last year called Kaltura, which it's not cheap. But it's also not outrageous, and there's a consortium price. Lake Michigan College is one of several Michigan community colleges that bought in on this as a consortium purchase. And what this product allows us to do is manage video on a platform above a course level. And it allows us to author content, and allows us to edit content, and allows us to caption content, which with the new ADA Compliance Act, on demand, people could say, hey, I want captions on the videos, and this product will automatically do that for you. And then let's say you've got 5 different sections of a particular class, you can deploy a single video from a central location, this media gallery, and sprinkle it through whatever Canvas sections that you have running for those instances of the class. So we also use that tool, but you don't need it, right? You can do that the hard way and just push it into a Canvas content block, a course at a time. But you'll notice we also have other work to be done here, right? So after people do, and this is this week's work in one of my classes being featured here, you know, they've got review questions and homework exercises, and these are just typical assignments that they would prepare with Microsoft Office or some type of text editor, and they upload those. But then when it comes time for an assessment, again, I get the benefit of the virtual delivery here, in that they take the assessments using this lockdown browser. And lockdown browser is really easy to configure. And again, I think we pay $5 grand a year for a campus-wide license, so it's not cost prohibitive. But I can come in and any assessment, I can specify the use of lockdown browser. I can specify an access code. I can even enable a webcam that will automatically detect things like head motions on a textbook if you really wanted to try to police that kind of behavior. And then of course we can also enforce time limits on the assessments as well. So we've got one place to store all of our content, all of our assignments, all of our students, and all of our assessments. So what's the outcome been? Well, we've had a significant increase in enrollment. I can only speak to CIS in terms of specific numbers, but within the first 2 years, we had a 35% bump. We've got increased flexibility. Students are allowed to choose whatever delivery mode they want any particular day of the week. We've had a 15% increase in course content as a result of not dedicating class time to taking assessments. And after hearing the last presentation about the 7-week format, I am kind of intrigued about being able to do, since there's no sacrifice in seat time, right? Basically start a 2-year degree every 7 weeks, right? That's kind of neat. But I don't suffer from course bloat. I wish I had more time to do what I need to do to get these people ready for a job, but that's what this has allowed me to do. I've got an extra 15% to work with. Students who otherwise couldn't have come to class are now able to come to class. I've got all kinds of anecdotes that I could share with you. I had a student who was a truck driver, and his name was Elmer Wheeler, which has just got to be the best name for a truck driver on the planet. But Elmer would come to class with an iPad glued to the cab of his truck. and I don't know how safe that is, but I had a student who was working at the hospital here, and he didn't have enough time to leave at lunchtime, come take a class or whatever, and he would participate virtually, and we'd see greens go by in the background. I had a student who had just given birth, and she was not going to leave her newborn with anyone, and she was able to take class. So it really does increase access to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to do it. And then the beauty of the Zoom link is I can leave that open. In fact, I have it set up so people can join without me being the moderator, and they can participate, they can share screens, they can work together anytime, and also get access to an embedded tutor that we have in all of our classes. So, and of course, I also use it for virtual office hours. So if students have questions for me on the weekend, since I'm offering online courses, it's kind of expected that I will be available on the weekend. Not all faculty want to take that on, but I do, and then I can share my screen and we can get some, significant work done there. So that's what I wanted to share with you all. All right, we've had some really good success with that. We've gone through a lot of trials in terms of testing products that support this kind of delivery, and anyone who is interested, welcome to have you, host you anytime you'd like to come out. We'll give you a tour and share our experience with you. And that's it. I'm 1 minute over.
Great job, Jay. Way to stick to time. So for folks that have questions, we have a few minutes. I see some coming through in the chat, but then also people can unmute themselves and ask questions as well.
Sure. So I'm looking at the chat. Lockdown browser doesn't preclude students from using other devices to access information. That is true. So I've even had students boast, well, you can put lockdown browser on one computer and I'll type your quiz questions in on my phone. Yeah, that's true. That kind of thinking will eventually catch up to you, but that's why I put a time limit on it. I mean, there is no absolute security. I don't think I would use it if it was medical school, right? But let's see what else here. Can Jay speak about the virtual delivery for adult basic education? So I only can speak with authority about CIS, but I can tell you several of my other colleagues have started to use this virtual format for different courses. And I'm not sure, I can put you in touch with the people who handle that. Okay. What kind of student success rates have you experienced? Well, great question. So there is a dark side. So when students come into class and I tell them, well, you can show up and I'm glad you did, and I would prefer you do, but you also don't have to if something comes up, right? You can sync in through your webcam. And if that is not possible, then you can just watch the recording. So I have had, not always, I usually give people an incentive for showing up in person. I'll like do an additional homework problem or something. But there are people who quit coming, and that's a slippery slope, right? It's kind of like, and I'm a grown up, I have a gym membership that costs $100 a month. I hear that place is really nice because I don't have anyone to drag me to it, right? So the way that we're handling that, rather than have the banner sections listed the way you just saw, where we have in-seat and virtual listed together and then online separately, we're going back to a distinct tri-modal format and banner, where it'll be a virtual class, it'll be a in-seat class, and it'll be an online class. They will still be merged behind the scenes. But if students register for an in-seat class, there's some thinking on campus that will mean that they feel obligated to show up. But at the end of the day, I mean, people just have to be responsible, and if you're on the ball as an instructor and you're constantly monitoring and you grade every week and you see that feedback. I mean, we have a tool we use now called EAB, where we reach out to students. We can also reach out to our support teams here and say, hey, what's going on? What can we do to help you? So I guess that's the dark side of the virtual bit, but it also enables us to be in touch with them.
All right, good morning again, everyone. This is Erica Oriens from the Michigan Center for Student Success, and we are going to continue with our program this morning, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve Linden from Oakland Community College to talk about some of their adult re-engagement efforts. Steve?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to present today to you. about adult re-engagement and also working to identify these students and reach out to them. To give you a little background about some of the efforts we've had at Oakland Community College in the past and even in the present time, going all the way back to Project Win-Win, it was really our first formalized work with outreach to re-engage students, even though adult re-engagement wasn't really the term at the time yet. But it was an effort to reach out to those some college no degree students about whom much has been written in recent days. And at that time, we sought to identify students in a range from a fall 2003 to fall 2010. And at the end result of that effort, we wound up, as you can see, awarding nearly 600 degrees to about 430 students. And for that one, we utilized an opt-out approach. I'm going to be talking about opt-out and opt-in in a little bit later in this presentation, but really I must, just to put a quick plug for opt-out, your numbers and results can be far greater, and you'll see why as we talk about that later. In some of the more recent years, we've also done some scattered efforts to do adult re-engagement with students trying different opportunities and seeing some of the different things that maybe worked or didn't work so well. And even with those, we've taken the opt-in approach to allow students to reach out to students and then wait for them to reach back to you. And it's had mixed results, and we've been still less than satisfied with some of that work. And in more recent years, then right up to present, is when we were involved with the cohort 1 group of Degrees When Due. And again, it was an outreach effort to reach to those some college no degree students, and we picked up right where Project Win-Win left off and took that one right up to summer 2017. And we wound up with that one just in our fall 2019 semester, awarding around 660 degrees to about 530 students. And again, the opt-out approach served us well. Going forward now, starting here in the winter 2020 semester, we're have some additional outreach efforts that we're going to try to, as we try to take the work of Degrees When Due and to gear it up to another higher level. And unlike before with some of our in-between outreach efforts, this time we do plan to be a bit more focused and really focus on the opt-out approach. But now let's talk about adult re-engagement and identifying students and some of the things as your institution, as you're looking to implement this, some of the things that you want to think about regardless of what type of effort you're doing, because the efforts can be very broad ranging that you may engage in, and you want to kind of think about all areas and aspects of it as you're moving forward. For one, what are you looking to accomplish with re-engaged students? You know, it's kind of like MapQuest. You kind of have to know your destination before you start traveling. So what is it you're looking to really accomplish with your re-engagement efforts? Are you looking to award credentials that a student has already completed and just never had posted to their student record? That was really a big push of the efforts of Project Win-Win and Degrees When Due. And you'd be actually quite surprised to find out how many students already have degrees completed that they've just never had posted to their student records. And this is true at the 2-year and the 4-year level. So that's always a good outreach effort that can really yield some spectacular results. Are you looking to encourage completion of a credential or credentials that are nearly done? Maybe you've identified students who are very close to being completed, perhaps a class or two even, and you might want to reach out to them to see how you can re-engage them to get that course completed. And keep in mind, just because they're no longer in the area around your school doesn't mean you can't reach out to them, whether they take the class somewhere else and transfer it back to your school, or perhaps even take the class in an online format at your school. They're still completing that credential. So don't let location hold back your efforts. Do you want to connect with the re-engaged students about how your school can meet their present needs? And this one's kind of important to think about, because if you're reaching out to students who have been gone for a few years already, just because you're reaching out to them about their prior program of study, that may not be their present interest or even their present need for education. So sometimes you need to reach out to them even just to find out, how your school can serve them today, not picking up where you left off necessarily 3 years ago. Or perhaps you're thinking about some combination of these efforts, or perhaps all of them. That would be pretty ambitious, but there's a lot that can be done with adult re-engagement. And terms of how you want to run with it and take it to new heights. You do definitely want to make sure you're communicating with all of the affected areas at your institution. For example, who is coordinating the effort? You know, I'm not talking about just the people, but also the departments themselves, because there's going to be a lot of areas that are likely to be impacted by your re-engagement efforts. And you really want to think about who those folks are going to be. When will it begin? Definitely this is some valuable feedback, because one of the things that's possible is that you may not be thinking about the busy times other departments have. And so you need to communicate with them to find out whether or not when you plan to initiate this project is going to interfere with some of their work that they have to do at that exact same time that you weren't thinking about. When is it expected to conclude? Or even more so, will it ever conclude? You know, kind of think about when things might wrap up, but many times you're going to find these are best suited as an ongoing effort, even though they may tone down over the years, or semesters. Is it going to conclude, hopefully, in perpetuity and continue to produce results for you? And again, think about the various areas that are going to be impacted, what is expected of them. And don't just think about within your institution, think about the areas that you have to use outside. For example, the National Student Clearinghouse. You may find yourself using student tracker features to identify whether students have been attending somewhere else after leaving your institution. Is your institution ready and prepared to use student tracker with the clearinghouse? Also, establish some of the eligibility criteria that you're going to be using. And this is going to depend on what type of project you're going to do. How far back are you going to reach to these students? You know, you don't want to go back too far. I mean, if you're looking back at the 1980s, wow, that's going to be a bit much. One of the things I would recommend is don't go before your implementation of your current student information system, because some of your data that you've been converted may not be as accurate or useful as you think it will be. And likewise, even things like with Student Tracker, if you're looking to find out about past degree information, Student Tracker only goes back 16 years. So you do have some limitations that are going to be imposed on you. How recent do you want to go? Do you want to go right up to the present semester? Or are you looking perhaps to give at least a year out of the institution for your threshold of time? Will you have a credit threshold and a cumulative GPA threshold? This one may be an issue if you're looking to reach out to students about degree completion. What is your minimum credit residency requirement at your school for that degree? Do you have a cumulative GPA, like a 2.0 minimum? Sometimes if you're looking to focus on equity efforts with your work, you may want to even drop that GPA threshold a little bit more to reach out to other students who normally wouldn't be included, because you can help to bring them into the fold and hopefully help them advance from where they were. Do the students need to be close to completion already? And again, this one, especially with re-engagement, how much re-engagement do you really want? Are you looking to find the student who's halfway done or the student who's nearly done? And this kind of becomes an institutional choice. Will you include or exclude certain programs of study? Perhaps this is part of a marketing effort of the institution, or maybe this is a focus on developing a workforce need in the area. So think about the program of study and how you might want to work with them. Doesn't matter if a student has attended another school since leaving yours. There is some argument that if they've attended another school after you, should they really belong to that school? Maybe yes, maybe no. Sometimes though, based upon your experience, you know that if a student goes to another school and spends maybe just one semester there, but did the bulk of the work at your school, you may see yourself as really the school that the student should align with, rather than that last school where they barely spent any time. Are there demographic characteristics you wish to prioritize in your efforts or downplay? Again, this could be some efforts toward achieving a bit more equity opportunities with students as you choose to broaden your horizon on who you're going to include, or whether you want to limit it so you can be more focused and more attention-oriented toward those students. And what about additional exclusion criteria, account balances that you might have at your school, grad app fees, suspensions, or certainly students who are deceased, want to be avoided to avoid opening up old wounds. But for some of these barriers that can be overcome without a whole lot of effort or cost to the institution, definitely think about how you can override those. Because you have to remember with re-engagement, if you haven't removed the barriers that caused them to leave in the first place, they're unlikely to remain at your school even if you get them back. It's just going to be more of the same to them. What about some of your process and system capabilities? You want to make sure that you're ready to handle whatever your workload is. And for some of these efforts, you may be surprised at how many students you're actually able to reach out to and help. So just one of the things I do happily caution against is to be prepared for some possible tremendous success. Make sure your staffing and resources are ready for the workload. Kind of talked about this earlier. You want to avoid the busy times, but there are busy times you're not always going to be aware of. Listen to those people and work with them on a good timeline for this work. And really think through all the processing steps. Some steps may seem simple, but when you really think about the workload, there may be a lot more than you were truly aware of. And in truth, even when you do this, if you're doing it for the first time, you can plan all you want. There's still going to be parts of it that you're not going to truly anticipate or be ready for. Be flexible as much as possible. Try to prepare as much as possible. Because you really don't want to try to be rushing to finish things before a deadline, which is really going to make the work that much more challenging. But I will say you probably won't have a full sense of what the workload is like until you've actually done adult re-engagement at least once. So thinking about communication with adult re-engagement, anything that seeks to add or change something on a student's record, that student's prior authorization or some type of authorization from the student is going to become a big FERPA consideration that you need to think about. And with the opt-in approach, that's when students must provide authorization for an action to occur. You reach out to them and you await a response from them in order to take the next step that is to occur. Opt-out, the student authorizes an action to occur by not responding by a particular deadline date. In order to do that, there are some additional requirements that I'll talk about here. Well, first, with opt-in, it is faster, it's easier, and it is cheaper. Sometimes there's no cost, especially if you're considering sending the communications by email. But it is faster and easier in that response, but you will have lower response rates. This is going to result in you being able to take fewer opportunities to do whatever it was you were seeking to accomplish. And lastly, achieving better response rates may involve additional follow-up communications. So while on the front end, it may seem that it's not going to be as much work, when it comes to some of the follow-up communications to really get some good results from your efforts, you're going to find that suddenly it is a little bit more work than what it maybe seemed like it would be at first. With the opt-out, I will say it is slower, it is labor intensive, and it will be more expensive too, because one of the things when you send a letter to a student, you must know that the student received the letter so that you can take action by the student's non-response. You have to know that the student received the letter. And one of the ways that you probably will be able to best do this is through certified mail, which admittedly can be a little pricey. And we're talking in the area of anywhere from about like $5.65 per letter, all the way up to $6.85 per letter. And sometimes that, people hear that and they say, no way. But at the same time, if I come up to you with a list of say 100, 200 students and indicate to you with this investment on these students, we believe that we can get about 60 to 70% of them with degrees awarded or some type of further action that's going to be taken that benefits the institution. Suddenly that cost that you spent on per letter really starts to be outweighed by the investment that the student makes in your school by returning to your hallowed halls. You'll have more opportunities because, quite honestly, you'll be amazed at the number of students who don't reply even when receiving a certified letter. But that inaction does allow you to take action. And if you're really looking to get the biggest bang for your buck, this is the pathway that you're probably going to want to pursue. And it is one I do highly recommend in working with it. To kind of give you an example of how the opt-out looks, what you're seeing is actually one of a little snippet of a letter that we sent out to students who actually had one or more degrees completed. And we sent them this letter, here's how your name would appear on your diploma. And as you can see, if we don't hear different you by December 2nd, we will go ahead and post your degrees to your student record shortly after the fall semester has concluded, and that your diploma will be mailed out to you. Now that letter also included instructions how to opt out of this effort. It also gave directions on how if they wanted their name to appear differently than what we've shown on here. And we did hear from a number of students who maybe wanted their name to appear differently. But ultimately with these efforts, both with Project Win-Win, we've experienced about a 70% opportunity where the letters reached the students, and we were therefore able to post the degree or certificate to a student record. And with Degrees When Due, we found that percentage to be around 60%. So you do reach a number of students, and your address information, you may need to work with a third-party vendor to help you with that. And there are a number of vendors out there that can provide very good address information. But you will find that this will get you a lot better results and put you in touch with the student. And many students will be in touch with you as well. We've had a number of nice emails from students thanking us, never knowing that they had these degrees completed or happy to be restarting at the institution. But when working with this, remember, anything worth doing is worth doing well. And so you really want to put the effort into it. It will take a fair amount of effort. I'm not going to beat around the bush with that. But the work is really worthwhile. Every time we've done it, we've seen some really good positive results. It may push some of your system capabilities and degree audit capabilities further than you have before. But the nice thing is you establish a new boundary about what they can do, and you learn from it, and your system ultimately becomes better. It's also going to really draw on the abilities of your staff in the various areas that are going to be part of this effort. So, be clear about that to them and give them the opportunity to shine, because I'm sure they will. So despite all these, though, the results, they can be happily surprising, and will speak to your institution's dedicating to helping students resume their academic journeys and to achieve the success that they've been working toward, and in some instances have already wrapped up on their own. So with that, I would like to see what kind of questions we have.
Great, thanks, Steve. Folks can unmute themselves to ask questions or add questions to the chat. While we're waiting for that, Steve, I did have one question about the financial aid exit counseling. If you auto award the degrees, can you speak to some of the intersection with financial aid?
Well, one of the things with adult re-engagement, in many instances, these are students who have already been out of higher ed for at least 6 months, in which case if they were had some sort of financial aid loan, they've already gone beyond the deferment period. And so they're already in repayment. So
oh, great, thank you.
That takes care of that. Unfortunately, I know I'm not able to see any of the chats right now, but.
Oh, I'll monitor it for you.
Okay.
And so your letter mentioned that you would be mailing the example you provided, you would be mailing degrees in February. So are you doing that now? Yeah,
we're currently printing the diplomas, mailing them out. I feel sorry for the staff person who has to work on that, because I gave her a whole lot more work than she would normally have this time of year. But she knew it was coming, and we increased our diploma quantities to make sure that we're ready to handle the additional number. This wound up actually about doubling our fall 2019 graduation numbers.
And is that compared to fall of 2018?
Yes, compared to fall of 2018.
Wow, that's impressive.
So, and of course, these students will all be invited to commencement. I know I've heard from one student already who lives in Florida that was going to arrange her trip up to visit her parents at that time to make sure she's at commencement. So we'll be happy to see all of them.
That's great.
And even just posting awarding degrees to students who have already gotten them completed can actually also result in a whole another level of re-engagement, where sometimes these students then resume their studies at your school to pursue a different degree, or the one they were originally trying to earn but never completed, even though they completed a different one along the way. So you can, in that case, that's a double win in that case.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it. For those of you who are on the line, the slides will be posted and available on the web after the meeting today. And we will go ahead and take our break, and we'll see you back here at 10:30.
Right, thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
a lot. Again, this is Erica Oriens from the Michigan Center for Student Success, and I am pleased to invite Holly Diamond to talk about the debt forgiveness program that they have at Henry Ford College. Holly?
Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining the presentation. And I'm happy to talk with you a little bit about the debt forgiveness programs that Henry Ford has been running. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. For those of you who don't know, debt forgiveness is not new to Henry Ford. We previously ran a campaign in summer 2013, fall 2016, and we just launched a new one that I'm going to talk specifically about today, which is in partnership with Oakland University as well as Wayne State University. So when we started, we had a directive from our president, let's do a debt forgiveness. So we talked about who are the key stakeholders on our campus, and I would encourage you, if you're going to do this, really don't think just high-level individuals like the vice presidents, the deans. It's really important to take into consideration the people who have the most contact with the students. And that's why we selected such a large team that we did, because we wanted to make sure that they knew how they could best assist the students returning to our college. After we identified who all of our key stakeholders were, we held a series of team meetings before we even launched, before we started talking about anything. We wanted to make sure everybody recognized their roles, what assignments needed to be done, and that began talks into how we were going to develop our criteria. Oh, sorry. And so if you're going to do a debt forgiveness program, the internal criteria is important for each institution. And from my experience, institutions really vary on this. I'm going to share with you some things to consider. I'm also going to share with you the things that Henry Ford did. And so as part of our internal criteria, we looked at students who had been not enrolled for at least 2 years. We also looked at them that their minimum balance was $200 or more. We also looked at a minimum grade point average of a 2.0, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And we talked about payment terms if we were going to get into whether it was a 50% or allow installments. I do want to go back to the grade point average for 1 minute. I know I said a 2.0 GPA, but recognizing for some of these students that life happens, anybody who is between a 1.7 and a 2.0 is taken to a team for special consideration. So we have found that to be very beneficial for our students. And the other component is, I said, for the payment terms, what we're doing, and this, I can also talk with you later on about this. We have two options. The students can do a 50% payment and then they're done, and we have forgiven 50% of their tuition. Or we forgive 50% of their tuition, they provide us 10% down and have 3 installments, 10%, 20%, and then a 10%. While they're doing this, we are releasing their transcripts. How the program started was we initially went with Wayne State and OU, and we released the transcripts to those institutions. We have made a change, and we are now working more broadly with other institutions for our students. And we can go to the next slide. What we found after we developed the criteria, we needed to train our team. And I say the 3 C's the 3 C's, and they were all communication. We had a learning experience from this in that we rolled out very quickly, and I don't feel like everybody had all the information. We had some moving parts. So if you're going to do this, I would say establish your criteria and hold as many communication meetings as you can, or put the information out on the web, and really make sure the team understands what's happening. And so after we developed our plans, we did bring everybody on campus together, and we wanted everybody who touched a student. So not just student services, not just the student accounting office or financial aid. We brought together key components like marketing, communications, even campus safety, so that they could understand some of what was happening. We provided to them a list of what the program was, of course, frequently asked questions. And I would say if you're going to do this, expect a lot of what ifs. As we trained our team, we had just such smart people who are so experienced to be able to tell us, hey, have you thought of this? What happens if this? What happens if they don't pay? What if they default? We learned a great majority from our team stakeholders. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the logistics. So when we have the core team, we decided who leads the program on campus, because there are, as I said earlier, different people involved. And for Henry Ford, currently enrollment services and student accounting are doing this together. For the previous two campaigns, it was financial services. So we've had a little bit of a change in leadership here, who wanted to see some collaboration from different parts of the college to serve our students. As you do this, you'll want to think about how are you tracking the students who are in the program. Henry Ford does it two ways. Enrollment Services has a particular code that we use so that we track them as eligible for the program. And Student Accounting, Financial Services, has a code enrolled in the program. And we use this to determine where students are, who is paid, who's defaulting, who is moving and making great success. And we're using this to monitor where we're going to go in the future with this. The other components I would say is the web page, developing an internal web page first, and making sure it is up to date frequently. As some things changed here, we didn't always have the web page updated, which caused confusion. So take a learning experience from us, and hopefully it'll make yours successful. And I would say also make sure your financial services or student accounting office develops a payment plan, and that talks about those terms that I referenced earlier. So what we do with that is we have a student come in and sign it. If a student can't come in, then we arrange some alternative methods of them reviewing the contract, signing it, and returning it to our institution. Now, we have all of our logistics set. I want to talk to you a little bit about tactics and how we identified and communicated with our students. As I said, lots of people involved in this. So we talked to our friends in institutional research, and we asked them all of that criteria I told you about. I asked them, could you give us the number of students that fit this? So then we worked, meaning we, enrollment services, financial services, we looked at the criteria and we double checked it. We took out things like one of our criteria is a student could not have been previously in collections. So we sorted our data, and then we began formulating our communication plan, which involved emails to the students. We did use their institutional email because that's our policy. And we directed them to our debt forgiveness webpage. I would also suggest taking a piece from our book in that you would maybe want to do postcards, but word them carefully so you're not violating FERPA when it gets to the student's home, like, hello, you owe a balance. You know, we don't want to put a student in that situation, but something that announces this great new debt forgiveness program or return to college, or, you know, let's get your degree, move, you know, make some advances, make a success. So I would say postcards are really a big help. and press releases. Our friends in marketing and communications have been phenomenal here at Henry Ford in advertising our program. They did a great job. They did a press release the same day that this was talked about downtown in Detroit. So we started getting calls and we didn't even know anything about it. So it was wonderful. We were able to learn quickly and move forward. So I'm sure you're wondering, does this really work and what are the numbers? Earlier this week, I'll tell you, we had 51 students in the program. Today, this is as of yesterday, we now have 69 students. And we're monitoring these, and 25% of them have defaulted on their payment plan. So what we're going to do is we don't penalize them any further. For example, having any type of payment fees, or excuse me, late payment fees or default fees. We just remove them from the program and they're not eligible to participate in a debt forgiveness program in the future. We have 29% that are still in active repayment. So they're paying us right now and they're also in classes or they've had transcripts sent to other institutions. And the part we're really excited about is 46% have paid their balance. And we couldn't be happier that we're able to make a big difference in the lives of these students. And right now, and I would suggest for you, if you decide to do this, we get a lot of questions about this right here. Two things. One is, are we monitoring our populations? First, are we monitoring the default population? How can we get them back and re-engaged in a system to attend in the future? The other component is, what are you doing, enrollment services or registrar's office, to make sure the students are on track for their degrees or their certificates? So we are working on doing that now, checking to see, because we just launched this in the fall, so it's still fairly early, but we expect to see some results after this semester and having our students be closer, some of them at least, closer to graduation from their certificate or their degree program. And so now in summary, I would say the feedback has been wonderful. The students are incredibly grateful. We have students who are just jumping for joy. We had people crying. They were so happy that we were making a difference in their lives. Some students couldn't believe we would be willing to forgive 50% of their tuition. They also were really grateful for the payment options. A number of students did the 50%, but a lot of the students really liked being able to put a certain percentage down and then have those 3 monthly installments. I would say the next steps are, if you're going to do this, and we're in the process of doing this now, we're debriefing with the core team, and as well as those frontline service individuals, and making sure we don't need to tweak anything for our program. And we are actually in the process of relaunching this in this month, actually next week, to focus on students for spring, summer, and fall. And some of the differences we're doing is we're revising our postcard, we're revising our communications, and we have talked a little bit about earlier, I talked a little bit about what we would do differently, and I think for us it's really the communication internally. We needed to have much more communication, and I feel like we have that right now. Everybody knows about the debt forgiveness program, so we're treating students differently. When they call and say, I have a balance, I can't register, instead of saying, okay, you need to pay, we are saying to them, okay, let's get some more information about you. And we learn sometimes that they are eligible for the debt forgiveness program. And the last thing I'll tell you is, for those who aren't eligible because maybe they've been in collections or their GPA is way too far down, our student accounting office has been able to make alternate payment arrangements for them. We don't allow enrollment during that time period, but once they meet that criteria, they are eligible to then enroll back in the institution. So I tried to make it as concise as possible. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them, or we can do it. Feel free to email me.
Great, thank you, Holly. You presented in exactly 15 minutes, so congratulations for that.
I tried.
Good job. I'm going to end my slideshow because I can't view the chat while I'm presenting. But I wanted to make sure that we answered some questions. And so
Okay.
Emily from Delta asked, at what point do you release the transcript?
We release the transcript after the either the complete 50% down payment, or if they're going for the installment, we release it after the first down payment.
For the 50%, what is the maximum that you forgive?
That is a great question, and not the only person who's asked that. If you can believe it, this institution has been generous enough that we do not have a maximum forgive amount right now. You know, that may change in the future, but the college feels so strongly about re-engaging these students, you know, because maybe life has happened, things, you know, are, you know, have not went the way for them that they wanted them to. We don't feel like we want to put a cap on that right now.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Holly? So Holly, I'm wondering if we would also be able to share with folks the website that you use, and I'm wondering if that is internal just to people at Henry Ford College, or if that's available to the public.
It is available to the public, and it's on the slides, or if you search our website for Hawk Pathways, you'll also find that, because that's what we've named our program. It's a pathway to success, however that is defined for a student.
Great, thank you. And then we had another question. If you know, what is the average credit load for those students who are enrolled in the program?
I do not have that right now, but we are, as I said, we're monitoring them and analyzing their enrollment right now on how close they are to their degrees, and I can certainly find out their average and credit enrollment.
Great. And then another question, is there a minimum number of credits that a student needs to have completed to be eligible to enroll in the program?
No, that's a very good question. I've not had that before, and there's not a minimum. There's a minimum as far as the credit hour, or excuse me, the money, $200, but credit hours, no.
So the student needs to have at least $200 of debt to be enrolled in the program?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, we have another minute or so for questions.
Okay.
I bet
There's
people are still typing.
There's one thing I'll add is when we're talking about minimum number of credit hours, while we don't have that, when the students come into the program, they are assigned an academic advisor, and they are not permitted to drop classes without seeing their academic advisor, because we feel like, you know, they've kind of went off on a path previously when they were here. We want to keep them on that right path to success. So before dropping any classes, they have to see their assigned academic advisor.
Great, thank you. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, we are right on time for closing out this session. I want to thank you, Holly, for sharing this information with us. As I've mentioned before, we will have this information available on our website, and we'll have Holly's slides available as well. So for now, we'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll all come back together for our last presentation from Muskegon at 11 o'clock. So we'll see you then.
Thank you.
All right, folks, this is Erica Oriens again from the Michigan Center for Student Success, and we are going to get started with our last presentation from Muskegon Community College, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kelly and Cheryl.
Thanks, Erica. Good morning, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. My name is Kelly Conrad. I am Vice President for Academic Affairs at Muskegon Community College, and Cheryl Flannery is joining me. She's our Early College Dean and Course Manager. And we are going to be talking about our year-long schedule. And let me say right from the outset that that's not year-long registering. That would add a whole level of complication I don't think we're ready for. Little technical difficulty here, but we're good now. So just a little bit about Muskegon Community College. We are on Lake Michigan. We are about just shy of 4,000 students now. We offer classes in Ottawa County, Muskegon County is our home base, Newaygo County, and we draw students also from Oceana County. We have probably 30% or so of our students are high school students who are early college and dual enrollment. So we've held our enrollment pretty steady and even grown with the high school graduates because there's a Muskegon Promise Scholarship and a Newaygo Promise Scholarship. Where we're seeing the declines, as I'm sure most of you are, is in our adult students. They are going back to work. They don't have time for school, but our employers are also saying we need more skilled workers. So we're trying to address some of that. So we are in our very first year of having a published year-long schedule. And the first question I guess I would want to answer is, why are we doing that? We started working with guided pathways several years ago. We were in the first cohort that worked with Michigan Center for Student Success to develop guided pathways. And one of the issues with student pathways is it's nice to put people on a pathway, but in order to be on that pathway, they have to know what's coming. And they need to know more than 15 weeks in advance or whatever it is, what their life is going to look like for the next semester. So that's just a philosophy that we needed students to know what was going to be happening with them. We also implemented the student planning module and software within our colleague system that enabled us to do automated grad audits, and it enables students to plan out their future semesters as long as we have them in the system. So they can plan a year at a time. Budgeting, it helps us know and predict what we might need as far as classes by looking at what students have planned in the system. We can predict something of how we might want to staff things up, not just based on after they start registering our classes filling or not filling, but looking also ahead of time, what have students planned on taking in the future? And then again, just that bottom line is we think it's important for students to be able to plan their lives and their education in more than 15-week increments.
Good morning, all. This is Cheryl. The first year, and let me preface, we are in the midst of this first full year schedule. We are in that winter 2020 semester currently. We, prior to the full year schedule, would develop a schedule for fall separately, and then the winter summer semesters were presented together. And we started building this full year schedule in October. So mechanically, there's quite a bit of time invested in that communication between the departments and our schedule building team. So the first full year schedule rolled out for us in March of 2019. Registration started in April. For the fall semester, we presented fall 19, winter 2020, and summer 2020. Again, to reiterate, that the students are only planning and they are only able to register when the registration period is open. And then again, they register through the student planning module. So from a couple different perspectives, from the student perspective, having a full year schedule shortens the time for them to map out their path to completion. It's beneficial for them in helping them learn more about time management. They can see the classes available by semester to know whether or not their next class is even available in that semester. Additionally, it allows them to reduce the time that they need to spend with a counselor. Sometimes we struggle getting them to get in with that counselor, so allowing them less visits to them and more planned long-term helps them to plan better. It helps with budgeting, knowing for the student when the classes are available and whether or not they're going to be able to afford to take the number of classes that they want to take, and if a reconfiguration of them might be a better bet for them financially. It allows them additionally to have a better balance of what their work schedule is and looking, futuristically for them, whether they're going to be able to manage more this semester versus next semester, and allows them for those adult students that work-life balance that's integral to keeping them enrolled. And is for students that are looking perhaps to come to this institution, gives them a better idea of what we're offering and when we're offering it, and even perhaps more readily available than maybe perhaps another institution. So from that perspective, they're able to see what they're able to get a little bit sooner. On the other side of it, one of the things to be mindful of is that the students are only registering for the semester that's available to them. So they are not able to register a year ahead, as Kelly mentioned. The planning of it does not equal the registering of it. So that can be a bit misleading from the student's perspective if they go into student planning and they map out their what-if scenarios and what they plan to take. Does that eventually equate to them registering for that class? And in the initial workings with student planning, we still have some of the learning curve as student planning is still fairly new for those students to know just because they planned it didn't mean that they registered for it. So, and then from our department's perspectives, which we'll address next, but just to mention that just because a student planned it doesn't mean that that is eventually what they ended up taking. Another thing to be mindful of on the other side of this is that that plan would obviously have to change, or their schedule, their full year schedule would change if there's a change in their outcome of a class that's a prerequisite for the next class, or if there's a prerequisite in there that they may or may not be unaware of. Excuse me. From the college's perspective, it's and when I say college, I'm mostly directing a good portion of this to the departments that we're working with on this planning piece. And it's a useful tool for the departments to know when more classes would be needed and whether it's cost effective for their department and for staffing, and who would staff for a more of a year long. So that ties in, very helpful with keeping mindful of adjunct loads, full-time faculty planning out their schedules as well as budgeting. The departments have liberty then to take a look at what students are actually then planning for their respective classes to know, if something comes up where they've had a change in availability for someone, a staff person, how does that impact the offering of that particular class, and how important it is to continue and be consistent with that plan because this many students have planned on taking it. From the staff building perspective and building the courses, there's more consistency, less margin of error in that we do manually build those sections semester by semester. So consistently, we can see that mapped out for a full year. So reduces some of the margin of error. It's more efficient from a staffing perspective in plotting out their workload. And they're only doing this one time a year versus every 15 weeks, they're having to sit down and key in the data entry on this. From the department chair's perspective, there's less flexibility for changes. So if you have a change in staffing, or you end up putting a new staff person, a new faculty person to teach a particular section, there's less flexibility to change the availability or the time that class has been scheduled. And that's something that, you know, through this process has been a continual reminder to our departments, is that you have to be mindful long range of that the change you're making now could impact the student that has already planned this on their student plan. And they may go along without looking at their student plan and until it comes time to register for the class and find that it's no longer available. So it's very impactful for the student, any change that's made at a department level. Then also, as mentioned previously, just because a student registered doesn't necessarily mean, or that just because they planned it doesn't necessarily mean that they're planning to register for it. They may have been creating what-if scenarios that just getting an idea, well, when is this class available, and clicked on it and said, well, maybe I'll plan this, but maybe it's not going to come to fruition for them. So that repetitive message that we have for them is we really have to limit the changes. And then it does, at this point, limit some of that historical data. So for example, right now we're currently in winter semester. We started building the fall 2021, fall 2020, winter 2021, and summer 2021 this past October. So at the onset of building those schedules, we didn't have historical data of enrollments for winter semester that we're currently in to be able to plan a little bit more effectively for some of that flux in enrollment. So, you know, as we sit here, we're in a second draft phase of schedule building. So those departments are looking at what's going on right now through their second draft before this schedule goes live on March 13th.
So this is Kelly again, and I want to add from my perspective as the Vice President for Academic Affairs, plus my just pretty long involvement in our whole student success agenda. I think it wasn't too many years ago, and I'm pretty sure we're not the only community college where, you know, sometimes at the last minute or within the last few weeks before a class started, a faculty member might decide they don't want to teach a class on Tuesday and Thursday. They want to switch it to a Monday, Wednesday. And the culture shift, as Jackson talked about being a culture shift around their 7-week classes, I think we've had a real culture shift about we need to plan and deliver for what's good for a student, not necessarily what's most convenient for us, because sometimes it's not convenient for us. And as I tell faculty, you know, it's 15 weeks. You just sometimes have to deal with what may not be ideal. So shifting perspective has been good. The other, I think, real positive for this is from our enrollment services point of view. They can go in and run lists of students who've planned semesters for, you know, plan their schedules for a future semester, but they have not yet registered. So once registration opens for summer semester, right away they can start tracking who has planned classes for summer but is not yet registered, and reach out to those students through emails, phone calls, sometimes text messages, just to nudge them. And as we get closer to the start of semester, it becomes a little more direct, you know, phone calls to say, what are your plans? And many times the student has just forgotten or not gotten around to registering yet. So that really helps us be really proactive from enrolling students and not just leaving it to chance. Because I think we all know our students, if some of them, sometimes they get very busy with life and enrollment times slip by and they think in their heads, well, I'll just wait till the next semester. This way, we make that a little bit harder for them to wait till the next semester.
There's one more thing I want to add to this that you have to be mindful of is the evolution of any new courses that you add and the timing of that. So if a department decides to add a new course, if students have already laid out that plan, they have to look at marketing and communicating that another way. So they would normally have to do that anyway, but because you're looking at a year long, you have to be more mindful of when you roll out those new courses.
Right. So in different words, students maybe last summer planned out their whole fall, winter, and summer schedule. And they don't really have reason to go back and check to see if we've added new classes to our schedules. So our instructors do have to be more proactive about recruiting people and making, especially counselors, more aware of brand new classes. So considerations for people who are thinking of doing this, it's from my perspective again, and I used to be a counselor for a long, long time, and this year-long schedule to me is it's a beautiful thing. But I think a key to it is to communicate a lot to the counseling and advising staff, to our students, to our new student orientation folks, to our enrollment representatives. Once the staff knows kind of top of mind, they don't need to be reminded so much more, but we always need to let students know that this is a real benefit to you to be able to plan your whole year. Counseling and advising is key. If the counselors and advisors can take the time with a student to help them map out a full year at a time, that can really set them on a pretty clear path to accomplish a year's worth of classes and not really need to go back to meet with an advisor unless they have specific questions or they want to do more. This is a real key consideration. Plan schedules need to run as planned. And that's where I think we've had a kind of a challenge with faculty and department chairs. It's getting less as they get used to it, but it's difficult for us sometimes to plan now what we might be doing a year from now. And that's what we're asking them to do. I think as we get used to it, they are used to it too, and it just works better for everybody. The registration period does not change. We still open our registration periods at set times. What has changed is we need to plan our critical dates for a year long at a time and much earlier. So our academic calendar has to be negotiated with the faculty earlier. Our withdrawal dates, census dates, payment dates, all of those have to be planned early, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Once we get it done, it's over and we don't have to keep having the conversations month after month. So that concludes our formal presentation. If anybody has questions.
That's great. Thank you so much. This was very helpful. We did have one question come in on the chat, which was, do you require students to get their plans approved by the advisor prior to registering for classes?
We do not. There are certain groups who can't register themselves. Those are our dual enrolled students and our early college students. Those get registered pretty much by their mentors. There's another group of students who will have holds and they won't be able to register until they meet with a counselor or submit their plan and get it approved. And that would be students on academic or financial aid probation. And the students or the counselors within the student planning module, they do communicating with students via email. They can look at the plan the student has made. They can communicate within that module and just have a check-in with the student.
Okay. And then you said you have about 4,000 students right now. How many advising or counseling staff? How many people are on your advising or counseling staff?
We have 6 full-time permanent counselors, and they're in the faculty contract here. And then we have probably another 5 or 6 adjunct counselors who come in. Many of them are former high school counselors who have retired, so they've been with us for years. And it used to be 20 so years ago that we only used them in the summer when it was really, really busy getting ready for fall. But our work has evened out over the year now. And so we keep them, some of them working throughout the year with us for shorter hours.
You know, another benefit with that counseling piece is that they're able to tell us when they're seeing a shortage of something, which doesn't lend itself only to a year-long schedule, but again, that communication is key, and they play a large role in that.
Do you have the Ellucian Companion CRM Advise to go with the student planning?
We do use Advise.
We do have the CRM Advise. How that's linked to the student planning, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I don't think we've wrapped those two things together, but I don't know, I'm a few years out of counseling. We use the Advise to communicate with groups of students. So for instance, we require our College Success Seminar first semester class for students who test into developmental courses. So we'll use Advise to communicate with that group as a group, and then as people register for the class they need, they drop out of the group, and we can just manage those lists that way. But I don't know that we've connected it to student planning.
Great. Okay, any other questions for our friends at Muskegon? All right, well, thank you so much, Kelly and Cheryl, really appreciate it. I think that was helpful information for folks. And I want to thank everybody who joined us on the webinar. We had great attendance today. This was a fun, interesting new approach we've used. I'll invite all of our presenters, and I've already heard from a few people who want to take a deeper dive into these issues at the Student Success Summit. So look forward to the call for proposals coming out there. And then I also included a link to where all of the recording and the slides will be posted in the chat. So you can find that information there. Thanks everyone. Hope you have a happy Friday, happy Valentine's Day, and we'll look forward to talking with you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.